All right, good day, everyone. Today we're going to be starting talking about inverse functions. This is our last section before Unit 1 is officially completed. So we're going to get right into it, just kind of talk about the math and everything like that and what an inverse function really represents, okay? So let's just start with this situation where Green's Grass Guaranteed charges business flat fee of $30 plus an $80 per acre of lawn mowing. For the residential customers who may have a more limited budget, Jim Green decides to determine the size of the yard he can mow for a particular weekly fee, okay? So basically, we have this situation where obviously Green's Grass Guarantee is going to charge you a specific amount. Okay, as you can see right here, they actually tell us that equation where cost equals 30 plus 80 times however many acres you have. Okay, here's the thing though. Let's just say in this current situation, you really don't really care how many acres you have. You care about the cost, right? If you're dealing with like a lawn mowing company, you want to ask them like, okay, how much is this going to cost me, right? So in a lot of these situations, you really don't get the acre value. You're not going to tell them like, oh, I have 5 acres, I have 6 acres. You're going to tell them like, what's the cost? Well, if you look down at number 1 here, they're actually giving us the cost of each one. So if I want to actually solve this out, try to think about how many acres do I have in my yard, I'm going to set this equal to the cost, which is 60 equals 30 plus 80A. Okay, so notice how I can actually plug this in, the cost in the equal sign to actually find the acres. Okay, it's kind of working like backwards where I know the answer, but I want to actually know what value I can plug in, my independent variable. Well, if we work this out, we subtract the 30, this would become 30 equals 80A, and then that would turn into A equals 3/8 of an acre. Okay, so that's kind of the key thing we're going to be talking about today with kind of in terms of this situation, in which currently I'm given an equation in which I plug in acres and I get a cost. Well, let's just say I want it the other way. I want to plug in a cost and get acres. Okay, to do this, this is where we actually think of an inverse function. Okay, if I want to look at number 3 here, they wanted me to make an equation in terms of C. What it basically means is my answer is going to be A, which is acres. So we want to think about how are we going to do this? Well, if I work this out, C minus 30, so I'm going to subtract 30 to the other side to get 80A, and then I'm going to divide by that 80. To get the equation, cost minus 30 divided by 80 is going to equal however many acres you have. Okay? And this is what we call an inverse function. Okay, and that's kind of the first key thing to understand. And the reason it's called an inverse is because it's pretty much the exact opposite in terms of your variables. In your original equation, you had cost equals 30 plus 80A. Okay, notice how in this original you were plugging in acres to get a cost. Okay, but the number stayed the same. Okay, that's another key thing to kind of note. We had 30 and an 80. The value stayed the same. Well, in our new equation, notice how now we're plugging in a cost to get acres. So we're legitimately flipping our variables. Okay? And that's kind of the key thing to understand about an inverse function. Okay, I'm literally flipping my input and my output variables, which is usually just x and y, to form another equation. And this equation is considered to be the opposite of the original. Okay, it's the exact opposite. So let's talk about the actual math behind it. How do we actually solve for an inverse? Okay, because that problem was easy. That was a very easy problem. We just plug it in, we let it work out, and it worked out perfectly. Well, I want to actually try to figure out the inverse of a lot of these functions. Okay, so let's look at letter A here. F of x equals negative 3x plus 8. So here's the first key thing. Whenever you get a problem like this, instead of writing it as f of x, write it as y equals negative 3x plus 8. Okay? The reason we use y is because really y, f of x, they're very similar things. Okay? In any way, they're both standing as an output. Okay? F of x is just the function of x. Y is just the output of that value. Okay? And what we want to do is find this. F of negative 1 of x, which this stands for inverse. Okay? Key notation there. F negative 1 of x stands for inverse. So let's go ahead and work this out. Whenever I want to solve for an inverse, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to flip x and y. Now note, that 3 is not going to come with it. It's literally just the x and the y that are going to flip. It becomes x equals negative 3y plus 8. Okay? And the reason I do this is just to keep things in line. Okay, now I know to solve this out, I want to try to get this y by itself. So we go ahead and work through our algebra skills. We're going to subtract 8. X minus 8 equals negative 3y. And then divide by negative 3. To get a final answer of x minus 8 divided by negative 3 equals y. And we have our inverse function right there. No, really, it's just moving numbers around. The beauty of it is all I have to do is switch my two variables. And once I do that, all I'm doing is solving to get the values by itself. Let's go ahead and work out one more. Same thing, let's work out letter B. So we have f of x equals 1/4. I think it was x plus 12. Okay. And our goal, which is like the last one, is we want f negative 1 of x. So we want to find the inverse. That's our goal. So starting off, let's rewrite this as y equals 1/4 x plus 12. Let's flip x and y to get x equals 1/4 y plus 12. And now we're good to actually start working. Well, when I look at this portion here, the first thing I have to do is I have to get rid of this 1/4. Okay? And the easiest way to do this is to basically multiply by the bottom number to the other side. So I'm going to multiply this side by 4 and this side by 4. Okay? Because 4 times 1/4 would cancel out and become 1. So this would become 4x equals y plus 12. My last step, subtract the 12 over to get 4x minus 12 equals y. And I have my inverse function, the exact opposite of what I'm given in front of me. Okay? Now, that's kind of the key thing for today, right? That's really just dealing with an inverse function, understanding how do we actually come up with it and everything like that. We'll go over this in class as well. But make sure if you have any questions on this, you bring it to class and we'll talk about it then. Besides that, have a great day.